Hello everyone, it's Dr. Wolfe here, and in this video I wanted to go over the genetics terminology that's going to help us be successful with pedigrees and just genetics in general. So this is on the back side right here. We may not use all these images, so really what we're going to do is just kind of draw some notes in this section right here, although we might reference these images from time to time. So just going into giving us some just a place to start, let's just say we have our cell, and in the cell we have our nucleus. And it's in the nucleus that our DNA is stored. And so here we have just a bunch of chromosomes right here. That's our DNA. And maybe let's take two of them and let's zoom in to these two chromosomes right here. So 1, 2, all right, and these are going to be our chromosomes. All right. And remember, for humans, there are 46 chromosomes in each of our cells. These are our karyotypes right here, right, that show there are 46 chromosomes, but 23 pairs. So there's 2 chromosome 1s, 2 chromosome 3s, 2 chromosome 9s. All right, let's just say that we're looking at chromosomes 14 here, right? And if that's the case, you get 1 from mom, and you get 1 from dad. All right. Now remember, a chromosome, if we were to kind of just unravel it, is just going to be tightly packed DNA. That's all it is. So here's our double helix. If we were to really zoom into that DNA molecule, there's DNA. And there are different sections of that DNA that we call genes. And genes are segments of DNA that code for protein. So code for a protein. All right, so maybe this is the gene for actin, muscle fiber, and if we go to another location on this chromosome, another locus, we might find that there's a gene for, let's say, eye color. All right, and so maybe your mom gives you an allele, and your dad gives you another allele. So what's an allele again? Allele is just a version of a gene. Okay. So we got these different versions of genes. Now remember, these genes, sometimes we use them interchangeably because the gene is on a locus, all right, of a chromosome. Locus is just a fancy way to say location. All right. So here we have these different alleles, all right? And in the past, sometimes it was like the alleles were A, B, C, D. From here on out, when we're actually trying to figure out what an organism's trait is actually going to be, we're going to usually use the exact same letters. So let's make a key to determine what do these letters actually mean. So I'm going to maybe bring my key over here. And we got big B, little b. Big B is gonna, let's say if we're talking about eye color, big B is gonna be brown eyes, and little b is gonna be blue eyes. So what we're looking at here, the combination of alleles for that one gene is gonna be that organism's genotype. All right, they have the genotype in this case, big B, little b, but we could think of some other combinations. You could have big B, you could have little b, all right? Now our goal is, okay, there's the genotype, but what are we actually gonna see in the phenotype? So phenotype, I like to really focus on this PH. That is the physical trait we actually see. And then just a reminder on some of our other terminology we've talked about before, big B, little b, these are both examples of genotypes that we call homozygous because they have the exact same alleles. Whereas if you had 2 different alleles, that would be considered heterozygous. All right, so a lot of this at this point we've talked about before, maybe not as much about this key, but everything here. So now we're going to go into some new stuff, which is actually determining the phenotype. What are these organisms going to look like? So it's important to notice that we have this uppercase letter, this lowercase letter. The uppercase letter is going to be our dominant allele. All right, so there's some alleles that are dominant. there are some alleles that are going to be recessive. All right? And again, dominant is going to be our uppercase letter, and recessive is going to be our lowercase letter. All right, the dominant, what does that actually mean if you're a dominant allele? This allele, all right, is always expressed in the phenotype. Ooh, do I have enough room? Phenotype. All right. Whereas the recessive allele is not expressed when paired with a dominant allele. So let's actually play out what those definitions mean. All right, let's say I have an individual, their genotype is homozygous dominant, big B, right? The big B allele codes for brown eyes. You have 2 alleles for brown eyes. What's your phenotype going to be? Not surprisingly, you're going to have brown eyes. All right, little b, homozygous recessive. 2 blue alleles, makes sense that that individual would have blue eyes. All right, but if you're heterozygous, you are not going to be a blend between those 2 colors, brown and blue. Instead, all right, the dominant trait is always expressed, and the recessive trait is going to not be expressed when it's next to a dominant allele. So this individual is going to have brown eyes. All right, so notice different genotypes, same exact phenotype. So you could see someone having brown eyes, right? Plenty of people have brown eyes, and they might have different genotypes, right? Some people might be homozygous dominant, some people might be heterozygous. So this is interesting. Some people might have a phenotype, but they might carry an allele for a different trait, even though they're not expressing it. All right. So going along with this idea of carrying a trait and not expressing it, all right, we're eventually going to go back to our pedigree right here. Sorry. So I'm going to draw a mini pedigree right here. All right. And let's say we got mom, dad, brother, sister. And let's say whatever trait we're looking at, all right, let's say it's blue eyes. That's going to be shaded in. Brown eyes is not going to be shaded in this case. All right, so circle, square, circle, square, circle. Blue eyes is shaded in. So let's say we have the mom has blue eyes and the son has blue eyes. So if I wanted to fill out this pedigree, I know the phenotype of blue eyes. There's only one possibility, right? Little b, so little b, little b. Little b. That's pretty easy, right? And then the people that don't have brown eyes, that have brown eyes, they do have brown eyes, they don't have blue eyes. We know that they have to have at least one dominant allele to express those brown eyes, so big B. However, do they have big B, little b? I'm not sure yet, so I'm just gonna put a dash, all right? So now though, what we could do is we could use this pedigree to see, can we determine these genotypes from the relationships between folks? All right. So one thing we could do is we could look at the children and we could say, okay, this little b, I'm going to do the one on the right side right here. Where did it come from? And you could say, well, we know the mom, whether it was this one or this one, had to pass down a recessive B, correct? Which means that this allele right here had to come from dad. All right. And that means dad has to also be carrying that recessive allele. So even though I didn't know it just by looking at the phenotype, I could look at the relationships and know, okay, this is the recessive allele right here. All right, what about this one right here? Well, where did this kid get the dominant allele from? Not from mom, definitely from dad. So this B definitely came from dad. So what did mom have to give this kid? A little b. So we also know this kid's genotype too, all right? There will be times where you have an individual and it's going to be big B, dash. And you're like, oh, shoot, it could go either way. It could be little b, it could be big B. It is totally okay if that's the case to put a question mark, all right, if you don't know for sure. But in this case, we absolutely know for sure. So hopefully these notes are helpful. We started kind of getting into how we could use these terms to help us with our pedigrees. Thanks for watching.